Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jazmine Valle, and I have the great privilege of being the administrator at Pruitt Health Spring Valley. I'm also a part of the Georgia Leadership Program, and I kind of want to give a little refresher if nobody's familiar with the program. Over the last 9 months, we got the opportunity to sit in board member meetings, to sit in subcommittee meetings, and we had requirements to write reflections. So on whatever we attended and some books. So we reviewed some books. And today I'm going to go over some of those books with you. Now, when I thought of this capstone, we have free reign to do it with whatever we want to do it on. And so I wanted to do it on something that I was passionate about and something that would really benefit you all. So what I chose to do, and when I pinpointed what I wanted to do, I backtracked to college. And so I reached out to one of my professors at Marshall University. His name is Dr. Ivan Muslin. And I asked him, I said, Dr. Muslin, have you ever done any case studies about what I'm looking for or collected any data? And he said, yes, Jazz, I'll make sure to send it to you. And he called me and we went over it. So this is some of the information that we went over. So the employee impact. So in 2017, there was a study and it stated that currently, we're serving 1.4 million Americans in skilled nursing facilities. And out of all those skilled nursing facilities, 1 of every 8 had been cited for insufficient staffing tags, all right? So that was in 2014. So now we're 5 years forward, and I'm sure that number has even raised. So we want to go back and we want to hear that, yes, we're in a nursing shortage. We all know that. It's hard to find a CNA. It's hard to find a nurse. It's getting to the point where it's hard to find dietary staff and even housekeeping staff. So the day of healthcare competing against healthcare industry is long gone, right? We're competing against fast food industry. We're competing against retail industry, and they're all giving comparable wages. So according to a study in 2014 by some NYU PhD students, they found that 1 of every 5 nurses were quitting their job within 1 year. So I thought that was pretty significant. So going on, I thought we have this problem where we need to recruit, right? But we also have a retention problem. My boss, Laura Backus, she'll tell us every once in a while, we don't have a hiring problem, we have a firing problem. And my mentor, George Hunt, in the AIT program at Pruitt Health, he talked about you never want to fire somebody if your fingerprints are still on them, right? How are you developing these people? How are you investing in these people? So I went through these case studies with my professor, Dr. Ivan Muslin, and we talked about what did the data show that made a satisfied employee. So we talked about how employees that are typically satisfied within their job, they want access to their leader. They want to be able to openly communicate, okay? They want to feel supported, and they want to know that they have room to grow. They don't want to be capped off. And also, they wanted to make sure that what they were doing had a purpose and they felt like it was fulfilling. So the next 2 books that I'm going to go over with you all that I reviewed for the program, I'm sure you guys are really, really familiar with. And they both said, as well as this data that I collected with my old professor, that satisfied employees result with satisfied customers, okay? So the first book is written by Jim Collins, and I'm sure you guys read it many, many years ago, and it's called Good to Great. And so within that book, Jim Collins stressed that your people are going to be your biggest asset as a leader. And it's not just any person, it's the right people. And so with that said, he talked about the 2 subsets of the level 5 leadership. The first is professional will, and the second is personal humility. And within that, he said that these good companies that go to great, their CEOs, they really dive into who's operating. They're making sure they have the right people on the bus. They get to know their employees, and they really start to invest in them. He also talked about how these celebrity CEOs that take over companies, they're usually not too great, right? They're usually got big heads, and they're self-absorbed. They don't spend the time to see who's in their operations. He said that the sign of a good leader is somebody that develops the people that are underneath them so that when they're gone, the company runs as if they were still there. He talks about also that when something went wrong in these great companies, the CEO never pointed a finger. They always took ownership of that. He also talks about when they did something well and had success, that he thanked them and he pointed out the people that got the company to that space, because you're never, ever, ever gonna get somewhere or accomplish anything by yourself. You always need others to help you get there. So, the second book that I'm gonna go over is called Hardwiring for Excellence. So this book, I'm sure many of you guys have read many, many years ago, but it's time to get it off the shelf and brush it off a little bit, because there's some really good information in there. This book was written by Quentin Studer, and so Quentin Studer was hired to go into these hospitals. And these hospitals had tons of issues, and it was his job to turn them around, all right? So he found that almost every single hospital he went to was focused on what? The bottom line, right? Financials, our budget, this, that, and the other. Well, Quentin Studer also came up with the healthcare flywheel. And he talked about, if you do this, this is gonna come, and if you do this, this is gonna come, and it's gonna give you momentum. And you're gonna start spinning like a well-oiled machine, okay? Does everybody understand that? But he talked about the beginning of that, and the start of the fire is your employees, your employee engagement, all right? And he said, stop looking at your bottom line and start looking at your employees. So, invest. Let's go over the definition. It's a verb, it's something you have to do. It's not something that just appears and pops up. And it means to devote one's free time, effort, or energy to a particular undertaking of the expectation of a worthwhile result. So with that being said, how are you investing in your employees? Is it time? Are you staying an extra hour to help pass out trays on second shift because you know you do not have the staff on second shift that you should have and these residents deserve? So are you doing that? Are you buying a CNA lunch because they're pulling a double for you? What are you doing to invest in your employees? I actually took the chance to interview a couple people for my capstone. First is Wes Brown. He works with Google. So like I said earlier, we are no longer competing just with healthcare companies. I thought, hey, what is a really good company where people would die to work? And there's a line of application. There's a line out the door just to work there. And I thought Google, all right? Well, I also thought that my best friend is married to a man that works for Google. So I hit the jackpot. So I interviewed Mr. Wes Brown, and I also interviewed Miss Karen Cook, and she works for the Studer Group. So they helped me a lot with this presentation. All right, so who here has been in an orientation and you're like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? Yeah, so I remember my first big girl job, and I remember I was sitting and I looked to the right, and there was a lady and her head was about to hit the table because she's falling asleep. And I looked to the left, and this guy was on Facebook creeping on some girls, okay? So your orientation, it's very important for your first impression, right? So when I talked to Wes, he analyzes data of employee satisfaction, okay? So they have people out on the fields that are going through processes and systems, procedure, whatever it may have, and he's analyzing that data to see what at Google the employees like and what they don't like. And so with that said, he said the number one that's always a focus and the most important is this orientation. And he talked about how it's always evolving, it's always being adjusted, and it's always being improved. So when I talked to him about Google's goals on what they wanted their orientation to be like, he gave me these 5 points. The first one is to introduce your employee to their environment. And I could only imagine at Google, he works at the headquarters in Sunnyvale, California, how big of a facility that is, right? And I mean, it's a little different. I run a 60-bed facility, so mine's not nearly as big. But think about it. Are you guys having your maintenance directors take these new employees on a field trip? Are you having them know where the eye wash station is in case of an emergency? Are you having them know where this restorative binder is so that they can document, okay? Those are all really important things, and it gets frustrating to do your job if you don't know where your resources are. And we talked about that. So the second thing he talked about is making your employees feel welcomed, all right? Making them feel like they belong, making them feel like they're a part of something. So you see this funny little hat. Now, Google makes their new employees wear this hat for the first month, okay? And it's funny, and I have a picture of him, and he would not let me put it on the board. So instead, I Googled the hat. And so they wear these hats, and it signifies to their peers, like, hey, this guy's new. I should probably be a little more patient with him, and I should probably introduce myself. So maybe we won't have these people wear silly hats, but what about a different color name badge? It's kind of like a get out of jail free card, all right? And it makes you more patient, and it makes them feel more welcome. It really does. So the third thing is defining their duties and responsibilities. This is important. They need to know what's expected out of them. The fourth thing was inform the new employee of company's policies and procedures, all right? So what does the company expect out of you? Go over the mission. What are we working here for and towards? So the last thing was to create a positive impression of the organization. So I know our job is not easy. We work in long-term care, right? It gets stressful. We all have a lot on our plates, but we really need to take the time to be a little more positive and not to act so stressed out in front of these new employees. Because if they see that, they're going, oh man, I don't know if I want to get into this, right? So the second thing that I spoke with Miss Karen Cook about was rounds. And I'm sure all of you guys that read Hardwiring Excellence is very familiar with this. And she said this is what backs their whole group, the Suitor group. She said this is so, so important. These 4 things, they really help in the process of getting your culture to where you want it to be. So when you're doing rounds, you're building relationships, right? You're going around saying, hey, how was your weekend? How was so-and-so's wedding? Did you have a good time? Did everything go well? You're building those relationships with your employees. You are gonna harvest wins. So if you see something that your staff really needs, and you can get it from them so they're not so frustrated. In the book, he talks about a copy machine. There's this copy machine at one of the hospitals that was not working, and it was very frustrating because these nurses had to go to different units just to print stuff, and then the units that they're going to, it backed them up. So it was kind of a domino effect. And Quentin Studer caught it right away, and he got him a new copy machine, and they were all so happy. They were like, we've been asking administration to do this for so long. Thank you so much. So it's the little things, guys. They matter. You want to identify process improvement areas. You know, if you're out on the floor, you can't sit at your desk to make sure that people are doing what you expect out of them, right? You got to get out into the jungle and see what's going on in there. And sometimes it's not always pretty, but that's when you need to address it. And last but not least, it ensures that the behavior that's being conducted reflects the culture that you want in your building. So stay interviews, this is one of my personal favorites. I got listed the benefits of stay interviews and some of the questions. I like to personally add some personal questions like, what do you like to do outside of work? You know, because work should not be your life. So what do you like to do outside of work? What's your favorite candy? If they do something nice one day, go over the top, bring them their favorite candy. How did you remember that? I like Snickers. Well, I have it written in my office in a file, but I'm not going to tell you that, right? So they're really important, and you get to know why your great employees are staying and what motivates them. So another one is in performance evaluations. Quint Studer talks about this, and Ms. Cook did too. These are so, so important. Your employees want you to invest in them, and they want to know how they're doing. So if you sit and you set goals with your employees, that's going to mean the world because you're going to keep them accountable, right? You can't just write this on a piece of paper and push it along. You got to keep them accountable, and if you keep them accountable, it's going to make them feel like they're being developed, and that's what it's all about. So those are some of the benefits of the performance evaluations as well. So how many people have been here that have been to a training that was not focused and you had no idea why you were there? Raise your hand. Nobody, all right, you're good. That's awesome. I need to meet some of the people that are doing your trainings. So when I talked to Wes Brown, again, going back to Google, he talked about how important training was, right? Because it makes your staff feel developed, like you're growing, you're giving them growth. But you also want to go over these bullets with them. You want to make sure that they know why before you're teaching them how. Does that make sense? What's the purpose of you being here, okay, before you throw it in there? He also said practice is the best training. You want to make sure that you're giving opportunity to your staff to practice something before you throw them in the shark tank, right? So they don't get eaten alive. You want to encourage employees that when you are at training, for them to bounce ideas off each other so that they really brainstorm with each other because we all don't have the same strengths and weaknesses and we can all learn something from one another. You want to expose your employees to networking. It's kind of like today. We're here and we're doing education, but we get to be in a room full of people all throughout Georgia. What a great opportunity, right, to network. And you want to have easy access to your material. So some things don't stick like other things might to the next person. So if you have this material accessible, they can go back and review it because it's not always going to stick and they're not always going to catch every little thing that they learn at that training. That is very important. So last but not least of my tools is these thank you cards. My greatest mentor in my entire life is my college coach. I played softball at the University of Marshall. Her name's Shonda Stanton. When I got to campus, the first Thursday I was there, she goes, this is what we do on Thursday. This is called Thankful Thursdays. So we were required to find somebody that we appreciated, and we had to let them know that we appreciated them. We had to do something special for them, whether it was bringing the Snickers bar to your favorite professor, or some chocolate chip cookies, or just giving them a simple note that said, thank you for all you do, I really appreciate you. It could be anybody in the community, any kind of faculty at the school, any family member, any friend, but we had to report back on Thursday, whether it was in the locker room or in a group text message, because we did it when we were in off season and at home on our breaks, and say who we thank and how we thank them. This is very, very important. I mean, who here gets less than 50 emails a day? When you say thank you in an email, yeah, it's nice, but it's not very personable. When you open a letter that's handwritten and it says thank you and this is why I'm thankful for you, that means a lot. It means a lot to me, and it spreads like wildfire. Gratitude goes a long way, and it's contagious. So please, please, it's something easy to do. Please start it. So the last clip that I have to show you is from TED Talks. His name is Simon Sinek. He's very popular on TED Talks. I encourage you guys to go look him up because he's got a lot of good stuff. And so he's going to talk to you a little bit about what John Black talked about, servant leadership, but how if you sacrifice and you invest in your employees, how it's the end result is going to come, right?
I heard a story of some Marines who were out in theater, and as is the Marine custom, the officer ate last, and he let his men eat first. And when they were done, there was no food left for him. And when they went back out in the field, his men brought him some of their food so that he may eat. Because that's what happens. We call them leaders because they go first. We call them leaders because they take the risk before anybody else does. We call them leaders because they will choose to sacrifice so that their people may be safe and protected, and so their people may gain. And when we do, the natural response is that our people will sacrifice for us.
All right, so I'm a firm believer in this. If you sacrifice for your employees, they're going to sacrifice for you. And it's all going to trickle down to your residents. And that's why we're all in this room for the residents. So today I challenge you guys to go out to your facilities and start with a thank you card. Grab one of these tools. If you guys have any questions, I'd be more than happy to talk to you guys about it. I hope you guys enjoyed my little session. Thank you, and have a good rest of your convention.